Good afternoon. It is a pleasure to see you all. This session is about Inter-Korean Railway Cooperation and Peace Settlement in Northeast Asia. We have experts for this session, and we are going to listen to presentations followed by discussion. President Moon Jae-in promoted the establishment of East Asia Railway Cooperation. And that promotion has been going on for the past 3 years, about 3 years. And also, many people made a lot of efforts to make it happen. So I highly anticipate the presentations for this session. Let me first introduce our two presenters. First, regarding the Inter-Korean Railway for opening the door for peace, we are going to listen to Director President Hee-seun-na from Korea Railroad Research Institute. And the second topic is going to be very sensitive but very timely topic. And the topic is the Inter-Korean Railway Cooperation. Is it indeed a unilateral aid provision from South Korea? So for this topic, Dr. Jae-hoon Lee from the Korea Transport Institute is going to deliver the presentation. And then we will invite 3 designated discussants to make a comment. And all 3 discussants have a lot of experiences in researching in this field. And first, Dr. Jong-won Seo from the Korea Transport Institute. And our next discussant would be Dr. Yong-seok Park from the Department of Economic and Financial Research at Construction and Economy Research Institute of Korea. And then we will invite Dr. Jung-jun Park from Korea Railroad Research Institute. So we have 5 panelists for this session, and they are all special experts in this area. As we were pursuing Inter-Korean Railway Cooperation, these 5 experts are well-known authority figures in this field. So it's actually a very rare opportunity to have all 5 of them together. I also understand that we have quite a lot of audience joining the session from online. So throughout the session, if you have a question or your own comment, then please feel free to type in your comment and question because we are going to have a Q&A session towards the end of the session as well. So now let me invite our first presenter, President Hee-seun-na, for the first topic.
네, 안녕하십니까?
Good afternoon. My name is Na Hee-seun, President of Korea Railroad Research Institute. Thank you for inviting me. Due to COVID-19 outbreak, we're having an online session and we are having non-face-to-face forum. I would like to thank everyone who is there to support us, and we hope that there is another round of momentum created for Korea to leapfrog once again into the future. Today, we are talking under the topic of Inter-Korean Railway that opens the era of peace. As you all know, this year celebrates 20th anniversary of June 15th Joint Declaration, and it's been 30 years since we have had the Defense Conference, and also it's been 70 years since we had the Korean War. It's a meaningful year, and in June, we've had some crisis on the Korean Peninsula. And we hope to overcome this crisis with our wisdom and our creativity so that we can turn our crisis into an opportunity. It's a golden time for us to do so. Today, we're talking about Korean Peninsula's prosperity, past, present, and future will be discussed in this venue. And we're also going to talk about connectivity in railway. In the past, how was the connectivity in railway, and how is it present, and how will it be in the future? So I'm going to briefly talk about these areas in my talk. Actually, in the past, through the joint declaration 20 years ago, we had 3 projects. In the border line, we created a small economic zone alongside the border line. Now we need to go beyond the spatial limitation, and we want to create connectivity space or connectivity not just in the border areas, but we may need to expand that into the whole land of Korea so that we can lead the era of peace on the Korean Peninsula. As you all know, not long ago, we had the East Line, and we also had a groundbreaking ceremony for connecting East Railway Line. I'm going to show this in the next slide. But recently, between the two Koreas, we've had some railway cooperation, and I'm going to introduce to you some inter-Korean railway cooperation that we are doing. And also, there's a new economy plan or vision of the Korean Peninsula, and there's also the East Asia Railway Community that we're also pursuing, and that's something that I'm going to introduce. We had Hanoi No Deal last year, and due to COVID-19 outbreak, the driver for inter-Korean economic cooperation has somewhat died down. We need to really create some strong breakthrough, and we look for many people's wisdom to create great outcome, and we hope that the cooperation will return in the near time. And I'm going to also talk about some OSJD and as well as international railway operation as well. We need to also have an awareness that where the railway is, there is peace. Maybe we can also devise a high official discussion so that we can restart railway project between the two Koreas. And we believe that kind of enhanced awareness that where the railway is, there is peace, will lead to faster implementation. Since COVID-19 outbreak, many of us are suffering, and the whole world is suffering. And we also may need to jointly respond together. And I believe two Koreas need to jointly respond to these difficult times. International community will change after COVID-19, and many experts say that after COVID-19 there will be regionalism, post-globalization, and regional interest will prevail. So creating a stable supply chain is something that we need to create, and something that we need to create together between the two Koreas. In addition to that, there's a climate change and low carbon economy that is coming on, something that we need to work on, and something that two Koreas can jointly respond to. Through this, two Koreas, I believe, can prosper together, and creating K-peace or peace economy is something that we are aspiring to do. Then let's go to today's topic, and let's go back in time. We're celebrating 20 years of anniversary in June 15th joint declaration. We have signed 3 economic cooperation projects. So in West, we have the railway development, and East, we have the tourism development. And it's connected by railway through Gyeonggi-sun and Donghae Line or East Coast Line. And through this, we are creating small peace and small inter-Korean economic community. For Kaesong Industrial Complex, many companies here in Korea, actually 125 companies went to Kaesong Complex to create a lot of good outcome, and 53,000 workers work together hand in hand with Korean companies. And we've had that experience to have small joint economic community. And we had a Kumgang Mountain tourism project, and every year 300,000 tourists visited that mountain. And in total, 2 million Koreans have visited Kumgang Mountain. Then, having said all that, let's look into present. We're celebrating 2 years since the Panmunjom Declaration on April 27th of 2018. The result of that declaration is the new economy vision on the Korean Peninsula. Compared to the past, including the past project, we're also looking into the joint economic community between the two Korea, and the goal is to create a bigger peace. And on the left, we have a Gyeonggi line, and we're trying to connect missing link, all leading up to Siniju. And on the east side, we're going beyond Kumgang Mountain to go to Wonsan, Cheongjin-najin, and Dumang River to connect railway. And we're going to connect second, third, and more new resource complexes to create true meaning of inter-Korean economic community. And we have this discourse going on to have a bigger economic community created between the two Korea, and we want to start as soon as possible to start creating result. So we have Yellow Sea Economic Belt, and we're also trying to create East Sea Economic Belt, which links to East Asia, and also linking this to all the way to Russia and China. And we hope to have a smooth economic cooperation between 6 countries. Creating inter-Korean economic community, and by implementing new economic vision on the Korean Peninsula, we want to create a peaceful economy, because peace is economy. And the East Asia Railway Community is also about using railway network to connect marine and continents. And by bridging these two, we want to create peace process on the Korean Peninsula. That's the vision, and that's the aspiring vision that we have in pursuing these railway communities. So peace and economy is not separated term. They go hand in hand, and we want to build that peaceful economy, because peace is economy, by creating virtuous cycle in economic cooperation between the two Koreas. In 2018, along with the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics, the Korean Peninsula has witnessed many cooperation with the North Korea. There has been many railway cooperation as well. We have had working level, high official level, and summit level discussion on railway connectivity, and it was an opportunity to reconfirm our commitment. In June 7th, we joined the OSJD as an official member, and North Korea supported this, and that's why we were able to join. And in September, we've had the Pyongyang Joint Declaration. We will soon approach September 19th next week, and it's already 2 years since then. And within this year, at the time, we agreed to have a groundbreaking ceremony within 2018 to connect railway in the two Koreas. What is also encouraging is that in 2030, we have agreed to work together to hold Olympics in 2030. So from November to December, we've had due diligence effort jointly by two Koreas. Korail in Korea participated in this due diligence. So we went beyond Tora line or Torasan to look into the North Korean railway, and Korail from South Korea worked with North Korea hand in hand to survey. So we went to Gyeonggi-san and Donghae-san at the same time. And also on the 26th of December, we held a groundbreaking ceremony in Panmunjom to reconnect railway between the two Koreas. So 2018 is a year where we try to secure movement between the two Koreas, and there has been active cooperation on the two Koreas to achieve just that. So we're seeing Gyeonggi Line and East Coast or Donghae Line railways due diligence result. As we As I have mentioned, we went beyond Dora railway line and we looked into the North Korean railway, and it was jointly done with Korail. So we went to all the way to Amnok River, and from Jeju to Kumgang, and from Ambyon to Wonsan, and toward the north we went to Cheongjin, Najin, and we went as far as Tuman River on the east coast area to look into the railway. So in total, we did due diligence for 1,200 kilometers line. So west would be 400, east would be 800. And North Korea prepared extensively, and we had a good restaurant cabinet on the railway so that we can travel to these locations without any problem. So we were able to end this due diligence without any problem, thanks to support from the North Korea. This picture was taken at the last day of our due diligence. This is Tuman River, and this is a railway bridge that connects North Korea to Hassan area in Russia. So it's a border area, and in the middle of that bridge, the North Korean officials and South Korean officials were together to take this picture. And we had a wish at the time to realize peace on the Korean peninsula. This is a Tuman River station. So this train goes to Moscow, and we were able to see that. This international route starts from Pyongyang to Tuman River and ends in Moscow. And even today, there are 4 routes that goes from Pyongyang to Beijing. But since 2 to 3 years ago, they have once per week train route from Pyongyang to Moscow. So North Korea does have international railway line or railway route. So as you can see, their railway infrastructure is not as bad as we have imagined. According to our key findings, for Gyeonggi Line, we have done a survey or due diligence in 2017. And the speed was 40 to 60 kilometer per hour. It's an average speed, and it's similar even today. And for East Coast Line or Donghae Line, we used to hear that the line is poor, but the speed was a little bit slower, and the operating speed is 30 kilometer per hour to 50 kilometer per hour. But it is encouraging that they have international route. So Pyongyang Wonsan has an international route. It means that their infrastructure is not as bad as we thought. Of course, there are lines that may need to be repaired, but we can do a safety check. And the current status is that it's not as bad to have this kind of a railway operation. So we're doing this joint due diligence and joint survey and together with North Korea. If North Korean railway can be renovated and repaired quickly, then as an OSJD member country, we can operate international route. So from Seoul Station, Seoul Station could be a starting point for Eurasian railway route, and we can potentially run international route. In the past, not so long ago, we've had the communication right, but now we don't have the right to move. That's why we had limitation in terms of pursuing many different business and many business within to Korea. If once we have secure transportation right or movement right, or right to move, then we'll be able to pursue many different business that we have been preparing. That will give us an opportunity to realize our business quicker than our plan. Here, the colored countries are 28 countries, and these 28 countries are members of OSJD. And OSJD, as an agency, has a stronger authority than even UN. And they manage directly on the shipping and transportation agreement. And it's a very big organization. And under OSJD, I mean, Russia now has Pyongyang Moscow international route, and China now has Pyongyang Beijing international route. And the North Korea became the 27th OSJD member country with the support of North Korea. So Korea can potentially, because we have become OSJD members, run international route. So we need to modernize railway, we need to connect railway, and we also need to have robust operation as well. So we have come up with a phased approach to Inter-Korean Railway Initiative. So in phase 1, we can start with renovating and repairing North Korea railway to start operation. We can do pilot projects as well. And also, through OSJD, we can even run international route. We could do humanitarian support and sports and cultural exchange, and a meeting of separated family and inter-Korean summit can be held through this railway. And we can also modernize North Korean railway by a step-by-step approach. That's the second phase. Second phase will be about modernization, and the third phase will be about another higher level of modernization of North Korean railway. And as we have agreed in the agreement, we can potentially have 2032 Seoul-Pyongyang Joint Olympics. So within 12 years, Seoul-Pyongyang can be traveled within one day. And once we have that railway, we'll be able to have one-day travel between the two Koreas and hold joint Olympics. So this kind of blueprint is something that we want to have in mind. And in 2022, we're going to have Beijing Winter Olympics again. So in 2 years' time, once we have Beijing Winter Olympics, we can ride the Inter-Korean Peace Railway to travel all the way to Beijing and win many gold together with North Korea. Once railway is connected, how will it contribute to our economy, and what's the economic feasibility of railway connection? UIC is the largest international corporation platform, and they have surveyed the global railway cargo and passenger demand. So X is passenger traffic and Y is freight traffic. When you look at the Y-axis, the highest freight traffic is in the US. So when you look at the US, passengers travel through air, but when it comes to cargo, US has the highest freight traffic through railway. Second would be China, and third would be Russia. Then how about passenger? For passenger, railway passenger traffic is highest in India. Second is China. And recently, China has installed about 350 kilometers of expressway railway. And the third traffic is in Japan. So Japan has many passenger traffic through railway. Shinkansen, as you can see, is transporting many passengers, followed by Russia. And we talked about East Asia Railway Community. And as you can see, many East Asian countries, including the US, has the longest or very long railway line, and they have very concentrated use of freight and passenger railway. So once our railway is connected between the two Koreas, we will be able to connect high demand around the world. So high connectivity and high networking is now possible, and Korea's geopolitical location, as you can see, is very important and it is favorable to us. So once railway is connected between the two Koreas, many regional countries or neighboring countries around Korea can be connected in terms of cargo and in terms of passenger. So in the middle, in the future, we might expect to see the flag of Korea as we connect these two railway. As you can see, China has high freight traffic as well as passenger traffic. The reason is that in the past decade, they have built many express lines. Until this year, when you look at the statistics, they now have 35,000 kilometers of express railway connected. It's two-thirds of a global volume, so it's an enormous amount of railway. In front of Tandung to Amnok River, they have express line built up, and in Huncheon near Tuman River, also have express line connecting China. In other words, when you look around the Korean peninsula, the railway or express railway infrastructure has improved significantly in the last 10 years. And having said that, from Seoul to Shin-Uiju, it's about 400 kilometers or less. Then once that's connected through express railway, then we will be able to connect to China's express line. And Seoul can now have one-day travel time to North Korea. Harbin, Changchun, and Simyang, these are three key provinces in China, and Thailand is another megacity. So these major megacity in China can be connected through this East Asia railway line. So the inter-Korean peace economy therefore can proliferate into China and further promote peace and prosperity in East Asia area. This East Asia railway community could very well be based on this project. Now going into cargo, I talked about passenger railway, but when you look at cargo, we're also seeing express railway for cargo. Russia is trying to increase speed by twofold. So TSR 7-day project is being pursued by Russia. Within 5 to 6 years, the project will be completed. Once that's taking place, there could be logistical innovation in Eurasia. I think Korea is very fortunate because China has built express passenger railway in the last 10 years, and Russia is going to soon complete its cargo express line. Then through Inter-Korean Railway project, now we can benefit from these different lines and creating peace economy, and we can also lead logistic innovation in East Asia as well. The Inter-Korean Railways value addedness is very high, and it has high potential. And Mr. Lee, or Dr. Lee, in his talk, is going to talk about various types of analysis based on this. But what I want to say is that inter-Korean connectivity is actually being improved. There's no reason that we shouldn't do this. It's a no-regret move. And by doing this inter-Korean connectivity, it can also lead to brighter future for the Korean peninsula. Social issues and job creation issue can be solved through this kind of economic cooperation. We're building a foundation for that. So to talk about the future, this is the summary page for the future. I talked about Yellow Sea Economic Belt project on the west coast side, and we can create an economic zone there. And East Asia Railway Community is, as you can see, the Korean Peninsula can link Pacific Ocean and Eurasia. I mean, Korea is connecting Pacific Ocean to Eurasia Railway. We have Asia, North America, and EU. So these three major markets are and can be connected by Korea. So in this region, if we can connect Eurasia and Pacific Ocean, Korea can play a very important geological role. So the West Coast Economic Belt, while it's being built, can now play an important role to connect these two different continents. That will further contribute to the future 100 years of Korea. As I have mentioned, COVID-19 outbreak is making our lives difficult, but there is also issues of climate change and low carbon issues. In order to have stable supply chain in the region, railway would be an important, and that could complete the peace process. Human New Deal, Digital New Deal, Green New Deal was proposed recently, and this is all named under the Korean New Deal or K New Deal. So we want to also prepare for the New Deal on the Korean Peninsula. This is the speech by President Moon to celebrate 75th anniversary of independence. We want to meet people before we die, and we want to travel to areas that we've never been before, and that is the practical inter-Korean cooperation. This is all about right to move. And we need to create that right to move together with the North Korea. That is critical in completing peace on the Korean Peninsula. We've already had a joint due diligence and groundbreaking ceremony for railroad connectivity, and in his speech he talked about that connecting the continents is the key driver for future inter-Korean cooperation, and he showed strong commitment in implementing what was agreed between the two Koreas. I know we are at a standstill when it comes to inter-Korean relationship, and as a result of Hanoi's no deal outcome, but we want to leverage our creativity to break through this deadlock, and three initiatives are put in place. First, we want to expedite and complete inter-Korean railway connectivity earlier than time, and we may need to come up with ideas to enable that. And also, we want to secure right to move as soon as possible so that economic cooperation can be done sooner than we have hoped. Also, alongside with that, Dr. So will be also talking about this point, but we also need regional cooperation with China and Russia. So we need to find a way for cooperation to enhance cooperation for East Asia connectivity. And also we need to continue to persuade the US to onboard them. And by doing so, we can create new cooperation with the North. In closing, with the vision of peace and prosperity, two Korea can work together to create a peaceful and prosperous Korean peninsula. We hope that the two Koreas can work toward this together. With that, I end my presentation. Thank you.
예, 나이승박
Thank you very much, Dr. Na, for your wonderful presentation. So he talked about how to open door for peace through the inter-Korean railway. By connecting the railway in two Koreas, we can share the physical space of the Korean peninsula, and we can also expand it to include the broader East Asia region. And also, it can bring about peace in the northern East Asian region. And Dr. Na is well known and well respected, not just among academics. He also, I believe, he's been to North Korea most frequently compared to any other scholar. And also OSJD joining. Well, back then, I myself worked with Dr. Na very much. And back in 2002, we visited OSJD for the first time. And years later, our hard work paid off finally. And we are now a member country. So as President Na mentioned, if we are to co-host the Olympic Games in 2035 with North Korea, it will be wonderful if we can really run and operate inter-Korean railway with North Korea. So if we look back on our KTX experience, it took about 12 years, I believe, from the construction point to the operation point. So if we want to meet the deadline of the 2035, then we don't have much time to wait around. We have to get to work as soon as possible. So I hope to see the resumption of the inter-Korean discussion on railway cooperation as soon as possible. Once again, thank you for your wonderful presentation. And our next presenter is going to talk about is the inter-Korean railway cooperation really unilateral aid provision from South Korea? So under that title, Dr. Jae-hoon Lee from the Korea Transport Institute is going to deliver the speech. So as in just now, we listened to President Na's talk, and the title was "The Inter-Korean Railway Cooperation Can Open the Door for Peace." So peace is what we want for the purpose. But many people criticize that the inter-Korean railway cooperation is just a nice name for South Korea unilaterally providing aid to North Korea without anything tangible in return. So my title might sound quite provocative. So I want to talk about whether this railway cooperation with North Korea is indeed a unilateral aid provision from south to north. So these are going to be big 3 points that I want to touch upon. The first, the recent trend in North Korea in terms of the international cooperation for investment in railway. And I want to talk about its relevance to the inter-Korean railway cooperation. And my second main point will be about various criticism against the inter-Korean railway cooperation and its implications. My last point is going to be what needs to be done to modernize the railway system in North Korea as per the inter-Korean agreement. So first, I want to talk about trends in North Korea's efforts to attract international investment into the railway system in North Korea. Prior to the Kim Jong-un regime, so in 1998, there was a joint research in Najin area with China. And later, there was another joint research with Russia, again on Najin area and other railway lines, for example, Hanbok line. But as you can see on the slide, these lines are actually quite consistent with the Russian interest and Chinese interest. So, for example, the line between Najin and Namyang, it is kind of the eastern tip extension of the existing railway in China. So if you look at these lines can be extended to Busan in South Korea. But after the Kim Jong-un regime, things began to change a bit. So first of all, regarding railway modernization, there was a real push. For example, the Nampo area in North Korea, that area witnessed the beginning of the railway modernization project, and also the highway speed between China, Shin-Uiju in North Korea, and Kaesong in North Korea, that began to be discussed again, and also Mountain Kumgang line as well. That was put to an international investment pitch as well. So in 2019, actually, regarding the Pyongyang and Wonsan line, North Korea made an investment proposal to Japan. So these lines are actually very important railway lines for North Korea. And after the Kim Jong-un took power, these lines are very much emphasized. Prior to the Kim Jong-un regime, there were some joint research with China or Russia, as I mentioned earlier. But nowadays, North Korea itself is quite proactive in attracting investment into these domestic railway lines. So this is quite a new shift that we are seeing from North Korea. So North Korea is now trying to adopt global standards in terms of building and maintaining railway. And also they want to provide benefits to the investor, for example, tax benefit or land use benefit. And they even hosted an international investment pitching day. So this is something new. And so this is actually the investment proposal. So this is investment prospectus that North Korea wrote and submitted regarding the Wonsan and Kumgangsan railway line. So there are various benefits, for example, land use benefits, and also some investment requirements. And also what you are looking at on this slide is that it says you can utilize you have 30-year frame to utilize the land and other facility, and so the operation period here says 30 years. So definitely North Korea is making efforts to attract international investment. So that's for sure. And compared to prior to the Kim Jong-un regime, now Kim Jong-un regime is trying to attract investment from the international investors, not just for their main railway lines, but also some local lines as well. And that's something to note. And these minor lines, the main line are put to discussion for high-speed train, and minor line are for more upgrade. So that's what we kind of guess from what from this information we have. And So North Korea has been making efforts to attract international investors and tourists as well. But as you are well aware, the transportation system and hospitality system, travel options, for example, flight availability, all these are very much limited. So if you want to attract a lot of international tourists, first of all, you need to have good transportation infrastructure, which is not the case in North Korea. So we think that maybe North Korea is trying to attract international investment because they want to upgrade their current transportation infrastructure. And these are some major criticism against inter-Korean railway cooperation. So to sum them up, one, it costs too much. And compared to this astronomical cost, we are not sure about the ROI because we are not sure about the actual demand for railways in North Korea, either passenger volume or cargo volume. And also, people worry that the profit from the railway project might be just appropriated by North Korea, or North Korea might want to use the railway that we invested in to move their military weapons and forces and to pose a military threat to South Korea. So that's why many people say that we don't need inter-Korean railway cooperation and we should not pursue inter-Korean railway cooperation. So this has been a quick summary for inter-Korean railway cooperation. So once again, from the public's perspective, they're worried about the astronomical cost. So they're against it. What about the government? So because the public is opposed to the idea, the government is also very hesitant to have active public discussion about this topic. And what about North Korea? To a certain degree, even though the joint Panmunjom Declaration includes a provision about inter-Korean cooperation on building railways, South Korean government has been very reluctant. So North Korea, for their part, has now very negative perception about South Korea's willingness to undertake this. So this is actually one factor for the current tension between two Koreas. So I want to touch upon these criticism. First, regarding the cost, many people are saying that it's going to cost 100 trillion won, 200 trillion won, but in reality, we cannot arbitrarily pour this amount of money in North Korea. So actually, North Korea, investing in the North Korean railway, we cannot do that without the consent from the North Korea. So it means that the amount itself needs to be agreed upon by North Korea. So actually, we cannot arbitrarily invest 100 trillion or 200 trillion won in all North Korean railways. So that criticism itself is quite unrealistic worry. And next, criticism. Past, South Korea has given loans to North Korea, but these loans have not been paid yet. So we now think that if we lend money to North Korea, we cannot get it back. But if we make investment in railway, not in a loan type, but in a kind of different type, for example, investment type, then things might be different. So, for example, we invest the monetary cost, and North Korea guarantees like the right to operate the railway system for 30 years, then it could make for a good investment case. And also, the investment cost can be shared among Korean companies. So, if South Korea has built high-speed train system, and we built it, and we are now operating on our own. So we have all the know-how and technology to run a high-speed train. So, but North Korea doesn't have such know-how. So if we are to build high-speed train in North Korea, who can provide subsequent maintenance services and operation services? South Korea, South Korean builders of that railway. So the revenue from the high-speed railway, North Korea will come back to the South Korean investors. And also, people are saying that inter-Korean railway network will not have much demand in terms of passengers and cargo traffic. But that's kind of a prejudice due to the past and the current circumstances. And also, when people think about connecting railway between two Koreas, we think about moving people and cargo through the Korean Peninsula, through Europe, Russia, Middle East, and ultimately to Europe. So we are saying that, the outbound line, for example, from the Korean Peninsula to Europe, there might be some demand. But for inbound, there's not going to be much demand. But actually, there might be a lot of demand coming from East Asia railway transportation. So, for example, currently, because we don't have a pan-East Asian railway network, a lot of goods and people are moved via air or by sea. So, if there is an alternative transportation option, such as a railway in East Asia, there will be new demand. So, there will be many benefits, positive impacts from inter-Korean railway network. And one of the benefits will definitely be to facilitate the East Asian exchange. So I've done a lot of analyses to estimate the demand. So this estimate is a railway line between South Korea and China. A lot of South Koreans go to China for tour, and vice versa as well. So we estimated some demand. So if Gyeonggi-sun line becomes a high-speed railway, and also if we simplify the border crossing procedure, for example, allow a more speedy immigration process crossing the border, we expect a daily passenger of 49,000 people. So this is for East Asia region. So travelers from Beijing and through North Korea and to South Korea. What about cargo? I also expect a lot of demand for cargo transportation as well. So we believe that annually about 23 million tons can be accommodated by East Asian Railway. And also, we need to break out of the current prejudices against the inter-Korean railway cooperation. Many people are saying that the inter-Korean railway system that extends into the northern eastern provinces in China till the Siberia is not very economically feasible. So that's one criticism. But as I mentioned just now, once we have this railway system, it will bring about real significant changes in how people transport goods in East Asia. So a lot of air transportation can be replaced by railway transportation. And also, if the railway transportation is used as opposed to maritime transportation, for example, then 5 days can be saved. What about cost? Because we don't have interconnected railway system now, so precise forecast can be difficult. But roughly speaking, we believe that railway transportation will be very competitive compared to ocean transportation as well in terms of the logistical cost. And also, if you look at the trading volume between China and South Korea, there is not much discrepancy depending on whether the volume is from China to South Korea or vice versa. So there will be ample demand for cargo transportation. What about operation stability? For example, if we are to operate the railway system is going to need electricity all the time, energy, and other control management services. So some people worry, what if we experience some cutoff in the electricity services? For example, what if the railway system receives electricity from the power plant in North Korea, and the North Korean power plant cuts off the electricity supply to the railway? Then what happens? So in that case, without any electricity, we cannot operate high-speed train. In that case, only diesel train can work. But would North Korea want diesel train? I don't think so. So the security risk in terms of the technical aspect of the railway system, actually, we don't have too much worry about security system. And what about some tasks to modernize the North Korean railway as per the inter-Korean agreement? So first of all, I want to say that there has not been official public discourse on this. And also, the public opinion is not favorable to this idea. So South Korean public are saying that it is not wise to pursue this kind of cooperation given the UN sanctions, etc. So maybe because of the kind of criticism, the government hasn't put this topic to official public discussion. So we often think that North Korea is very much underdeveloped and they don't need sophisticated transportation infrastructure. We think that North Korea's infrastructure needs is for something that we had back in the 70s and 80s. But that's kind of prejudice. Actually, if that is to be true, there should be no smartphone users in North Korea. But actually, people are using smartphones in North Korea. There are more than 5 million smartphone units being used in North Korea. So actually, North Korea feels that they need a high-speed train. That's why they're trying to attract international investment, because they believe that it is good for their own economy. So, but South Korean people still think that, well, North Korea, their economy is so worse than ours, so they don't need as sophisticated infrastructure as we do. And that's our prejudice. And also, South Korean people lack strategic understanding of North Korea. Within North Korea, they think of their railway project as a large-scale, massive project. But South Korean people are not aware of that. If we have interconnected railway, then South Korea can really become a major country in East Asia. But in order for us to become a major center country in East Asia, we cannot achieve that kind of significance with old-fashioned railway technology like the level that we used in the 70s and 80s. So, when North Korea talks about modernizing railway system or promoting railway project, they actually have high-speed railway in mind. And also, we tend to underestimate the possibility that we can make proper investment in North Korea. But for that kind of investment, we need to remember that South Korea does not have 100% arbitration. So a lot of things are going to depend on North Korea. So, for example, South Korea is faced with sea. It's really surrounded with sea. So actually, we're kind of like an island. So we also need to have a strategic understanding of the benefit that we can reap from inter-Korean railway system. So basically, my point would be that one, we need to have understanding about the strategic significance of modernizing North Korean railway system. So it's not just about building good infrastructure for North Korea. It is also kind of prerequisite for us to become a center country in East Asia. And second, if we are to pursue the inter-Korean railway cooperation, we also need to consider the political and economic needs that North Korea had. And also, we also need to deal with our own prejudices. So because of that, South Korea has been very reluctant, quite hesitant to deal with, to proceed with the inter-Korean railway project. And also, we tend to have a very old-fashioned view when we think about the inter-Korean railway project. But we also need to update our own perspective in sync with the current needs of North Korea. And again, connecting the railway throughout the Korean peninsula, it has implication not just for faraway Europe, but for more neighboring East Asian region as well. And of course, there are international sanctions imposed against North Korea now. So as for specific action plan, we need to think about two phases. One, the ongoing sanction regime, and the second phase, post-sanction regime. So for example, we need to first discuss about what types of project will be used to modernize the North Korean railway. So once the sanctions are off, then we can start modernizing the railway. And for example, we need to start preparing for building and operating the modernized railway system in North Korea. So once the sanctions are off, we can start actually implementing that. And also Gyeonggi-san and Donghae-san, the two lines, are we going to undertake modernizing both lines at the same time, or are we going to prioritize one line over another? So we need to think about that too. And also for this investment project, who's going to be the investment kind of host? Is it going to be North Korea who's going to make most efforts to attract international investors? And also, I believe that we need to build a joint body, inter-Korean joint body, to promote the inter-Korean cooperation for railway system. And regarding the actual construction, of course, two Koreas can do a lot of preparation in advance. And also for the construction, how much of North Korean human resources are going to be used? And then if that is going to be the case, how are we going to educate and train them? So how much human resources are we going to need from North Korea? We need to come up with an estimate as well. And we need to educate the North Korean workers for building railway system. And who is going to do that? Is South Korea going to do that, or some other third-party country going to do that? So we need to think about that too. And once the railway is built or modernized, what about operation? What about the attendant? Are we going to utilize North Korean people, or are we going to utilize South Korean people? If we are going to utilize North Korean people, how many of them? Again, what about training them? So, and the training, is it going to be provided by South Korea, or is it going to be done in China? So there are so many questions that we need to prepare for. And also, in the process of building the railway in North Korea, there is going to be some areas surrounding the railway. And we can also develop these neighboring areas. For example, we can build a logistical center near the railway. And for that, we also need support and cooperation with North Korea. We will need to come up with a design for that kind of logistical center. And lastly, what about East Asia International Railway? So we can run a pilot program to operate a Pan-East Asia Railway that will run through China, North Korea, and South Korea. So whether this is going to be sanctions or not, whether this is going to violate the sanctions or not, we definitely need to consult many experts. But many experts so far believe that this is not a sanction area. So it's possible And if it is indeed possible, then Korea, North Korea, China can come together and discuss this Pan-East Asia, Trans-East Asia railway system and make preparations accordingly in advance. So I've been touching upon what we can do before the international sanctions are off. Now let me delve into what needs to be done more specifically in terms of modernizing the railway system in North Korea. They need a higher speed and more robust railway system, definitely. Sometimes we might need to build completely new railway. Sometimes it will suffice to upgrade and improve the existing line. Regarding the railway in North Korea, there are many prerequisites. So depending on the prerequisites, the project itself will change. So these kind of, so what I wrote on my slide are rough ideas. So based on our current estimate of the project cost, and also, here, I assume that we are going to use a lot of North Korea human labor, and this railway project is going to be similar to the Kumgangsan railway project. So that's how I came up with these numbers. So based on these assumptions, I can roughly say that modernizing the North Korean railway system will roughly take about 79% of building new high-speed railway system in South Korea. And also, I believe that personally, I think South Korea should take a main leadership role in the project and then invite North Korea's participation and cooperation. So, for example, Korea can take a key role in financing, in funding, and building, and bringing in facilities. And North Korea's role can be in procuring the land and the construction workers. And this is the possible railway project site. So are we going to work on these sites all together? But personally, I believe that Gyeonggi-sun needs to be prioritized. So we work on the Gyeonggi-sun line first. So I think we need to select and focus on Gyeonggi-sun line first. And Gyeonggi-sun line goes through the economic center and political center in North Korea, and also it goes all the way up to China. So compared to other railway lines, Gyeonggi-sun line can create the maximum benefit. And also, we can have a fast track program, meaning we can complete the construction within 4 years. If we can simplify the administrative procedure, then I believe we can finish the project within 4 years. Some people are saying that we need to get funding from some international organization, but if we get funding from international organization, it's not going to leave much room for South Korea to participate and take a lead role. We are going to need to have consulting services regarding the economic feasibility, design, and others. So all these project elements will be done by the international organization who's funding. So not much room for South Korean companies to participate. So that's my final thought. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation.
우리 이재훈
Dr. Lee mentioned about the standstill that is currently going on in the Inter-Korean Railway project. And he also ended with a possible solution. Also, he emphasized the importance of select and focus approach. All in all, the North Korea Railway project until now have seen North Korean project as something that was done to improve railway infrastructure, and the required investment is about 100 trillion won. So the government had to defend its position rather than persuade its people. So government was unable to give actual fact base to the Korean people. And the North Korea, that's why sometimes had some question over the commitment of the ROK government to pursue this North Korean railway project. And as a result, it could potentially become a potential source of conflict for two Koreas. And we were able to hear a very insightful perspective, something that we will not be able to hear elsewhere. So with a trust-based approach, we need both Koreas to sit down with sincere attitude on both sides. And based on that, he not only just talked about theoretical approach, but he also mentioned the potential solution of having a select and focus approach, and to create a benefit for both of sides. So North Korea, when we approach this railway project, we have to approach with feasibility study in mind, and we want to prioritize railway project, and we want to leverage Korea's players, because by leveraging Korea's expertise, we can complete this project within 4 to 5 years. President Na gave the overall direction with phased approach, and Dr. Lee also talked about inter-Korean relationship and the reason why it's at a standstill, and he ended with a potential solution. So it has been a very meaningful two presentations, and there has been many valuable insight that was shared from these two gentlemen. And we have three discussants. So also from our institution, Dr. So Jong-won will be providing his discussion. Good afternoon. My name is Seo Jong-won. We were able to hear from the two experts, and I'm going to provide a brief comment as well as some simple alternative. And since the Panmunjom Declaration and through the two Inter-Korea Summit, there has been heightened interest in improved relationship between the two Koreas. And based on this, many talked about how we can create peace on the East Asia region. And in 2019, in April, we had Hanoi Summit between the U.S. and North Korea. But it ended in no deal, and the relationship deteriorated and resulted in deadlock of inter-Korean relationship. And this year we had COVID-19 outbreak and also spread of the leaflet from South Korea to North Korea, and that also is adding to the standstill between the two Koreas. If this were to continue, we may not have much opportunity to improve the relationship. So we need to break through the current deadlock. And as a means to do so, the Inter-Korean Railway project is a good candidate to break through this. As you all know, in the last few decades, in any summit between the two Koreas, railway project was always on top of its list. in 20th century, including Korea and developing countries. If you look at how these countries developed economically, they focused on modernizing their transportation infrastructure and improving its transportation system. And that was a shortcut to achieving great economic development. If we can have efficient and good cooperation in railway improvement, we believe this will be a win-win for not just two Koreas, but also East Asia. Especially when you look at railway. Railway compared to other transportation infrastructure can connect two Koreas and also physically link Korean Peninsula with Eurasia. So it can enhance connectivity with the continent. So that's why it's important transportation means. And every time we had discussion with North Korea, railway was discussed as an important topic. Despite this being the fact, because of many complex issues, we're not creating much weighted outcome. That's why we're having this forum. President Na talked about East Asia railway project, and Dr. Lee mentioned whether providing this railway aid is a mere handout to North Korea. But when you look at this aspect in the North Korea and on the Korean Peninsula, I think economy and economic cooperation can potentially create a virtuous cycle. And so we heard about vision from President Na, and Dr. Lee went into details about the things that we need to consider. And he mentioned a very detailed analysis to come up with a roadmap for how we can go about this cooperation in the future. Especially, President Na talked about 3 implementation direction for cooperation. I fully agree with that. And when you look at these 3 phase project and cooperation with China, Russia, and persuasion effort for the U.S. is needed. And how we are going to go about these 3 different phases, I believe, will be the key in making railway cooperation possible. When it comes to Inter-Korean Railway project, it may not be easy because we're at a deadlock, but when you look at the North Korea has succeeded its previous leader's position. So Kim Jong-il and Kim Il-sung was very much interested in the railway project, and it was something that was agreed in the summit. And recently, when you look at the recent difficulties in economy in North Korea, they want to focus on railway, and this is something that can draw attention from the North Korea. And Kim Jong-un's interest is in Kumgang Mountain tourism to develop its economy. And in that light, railway is something that North Korea would be interested to hear. And I believe cooperation, therefore, is possible. And as it was mentioned by our speakers, if we were to provide technology transfer after unification, then the North Korea will also continue on with industrial development, and it's something that North Korea will welcome. And also, in terms of cooperation with neighboring country, China has this strategy of One Belt, One Road initiative under President Xi Jinping. And when you look at different projects in the East Asia side, there hasn't been much progress, and it has not been linked to the Korean Peninsula. So if Inter-Korean Railway is connected, it is going to be in line with China's One Belt, One Road strategy. So it will be easy to persuade China. And for Russia, Russia has the new East Asia policy, and this railway project could be in line with their policy. The most important thing is the persuasion of Japan and the U.S. Here, it's not very difficult to have key points to persuade them yet, but inter-Korean cooperation in economy and not diplomacy or politics could be unique. And the U.S. companies and U.S. economy can potentially benefit from this. And if we can convey that message and show that's possible, then of course the U.S. Can participate in this, and U.S. and Japan can participate in this project, and they will be supportive of this idea. And we can also propose a pilot project for Inter-Korean Railway Corporation in international route. So if we can go beyond into Koreas and connect cargo freight at a lower cost, then the U.S. companies and other participants can enjoy the benefit, and we will be able to show that Inter-Korean Railway project is not a political project, but an economically beneficial project. Also, if we can carry out a pilot project based on this, then this could be in link with Russia's and China's tourist destination development that can contribute to building trust and also promote corporations on the Korean Peninsula. As Dr. Lee mentioned, we have many logistics lines connecting our border lines and the north and even to Beijing. And if the logistics cost goes down, it will be beneficial for the Korean people as well. Between Korea and Beijing, there is a lot of direct buying of goods, but it takes about 10 days to 14 days or even 1 month. But with railway, it could be reduced to 3 days to 5 days when we try to directly buy goods from China. So this could be a direct benefit for the Korean people for Inter-Korean Railway project. Of course, this kind of pilot project cannot start overnight. There are many requirements and prerequisites that may be needed. It needs to go through the review of the UN Sanction Committee. But as President Na said, as we became the official member of OSJD, the North Korea and China is actually running this railway. And of course, it's suspended because of the COVID-19, but it will reconvene. And for us, we can do this kind of project within OSJD framework. Of course, we need an urgent renovation and improvement to the North Korea. It's not something that other country can provide for the North Korea. So North Korea has to do this on their own, and that's something that we need to immediately solve. Second, as Dr. Lee mentioned, whether it's a unilateral support or handout to North Korea, we need to turn that situation and make it beneficial for us. Since the Sunshine Policy of Kim Dae-jung administration, many of the support for the North Korea economy faced this controversy. And one of the words of President Kim Dae-jung is that he said it's beneficial for us rather than unilaterally benefiting the North Korea. There is an abundant resource in Eurasia, and we can have access to it, and we can build a logistic hub, and it could promote industry and culture. There is direct economic impact because of this. This unilateral handout to North Korean controversy has been around, and it has been raised because it might have been used to promote military arms resource for the North Korean government. But I think you can use this project as an evidence that it's not going to just benefit the North Korea. And when we provide this aid, we can provide not cash but commodity or products. Then these resources will not be used or misused in nuclear weapons development. And as Dr. Lee mentioned, through negotiation, if we can have a railway right for from North Korea, then we can have access to energy resource in East Asia, especially Far East area. Also, if we can jointly operate the railway together with the North Korea, then we'll be able to monitor and manage whether other projects with the North Korea can be sustained. So we'll be able to monitor and see whether our commodities that we provide to North Korea is actually used in places that they're supposed to be. And Dr. Lee also mentioned this, but if you look at current North Korean railway system, it is built during the Japanese invasion, and the railway was used to exploit Korea's resource to supply to Japan. So the current network is not as efficient as it should be. So if China or other country were to decide railway lines and railway route in the North Korea, they probably will put their national interest first. So in order to consider a balanced development of Korea or the Korean Peninsula, this might not be appropriate. Also, railway needs communication signal and railway standard that need to be standardized. For instance, if we were to use, for instance, China's railway system, then it would be very difficult to consolidate with the Korean's railway system. We don't want heterogeneous railway system, so it is a must that we build Korea's standard when we build inter-Korean railway system. As Korea's economic position develops, our ODA fund has grown every year. It is growing on a year-on-year basis. Currently, we cannot provide ODA to the North Korea due to the legal constraint. The ODA fund can be only provided to developing country. So that's not easy to use, but maybe we can change that code. And if developing country includes DPRK, then we will be able to provide funding, at least partial funding, to the infrastructure project in the North Korea. And through ODA project, if we are able to improve North Korean infrastructure, it will contribute to our inter-Korean consolidation and reunification. If you look at German case, German had massive financial spending after reunification, but we will be able to curb that by acting first. Thank you. With that, I end my comment.
감사합니다.
Thank you very much for your comment. So Dr. Seo made a very thorough comments on the two presentations. I believe it shows how completely he understood the two presentations. If you look at the current status of the inter-Korean relations, it's really stagnant currently. So this railway cooperation could be a great opportunity to make a breakthrough. And inter-Korean railway cooperation can lead to a broader cooperation in East Asia. And Northeast Asian railway community can be promoted by the inter-Korean railway cooperation. And of course, each country may have its own views, but we can invite Japan and the US to this project as well. And if we can persuade them that this project will make economic sense to Japan and the US as well, they might want to participate as well. So definitely the Inter-Korean Railway Cooperation is not just a unilateral handout from South Korea to North Korea. And also we can also utilize the ODA funding. That could be another funding option. So thank you very much for your great idea. And the next discussant is from the Construction and Economy Research Institute of Korea, Dr. Yong-seok Park. So Dr. Park, if you can comment on the two presentations and other relevant topics. Good afternoon. As introduced, I am Dr. Yong-seok Park from Construction and Economy Research Institute of Korea. I listened to the two presentations very well, and I don't have much more comments to add because the previous the presentations were so thorough, and previous discussants made great comments, and I thoroughly agree with the presenters. But if I can add my 2 cents, so first of all, North Korea conducted joint research with Russia, and they also had a MOU, joint research and MOU with China, but it's now stopped. And with Russia, they also talked about revamping railway line between Najinhang and other destination, but that also didn't go very well because of the international sanctions. And in 2014, Russia's Far Eastern Development Bureau talked about developing their Far Eastern region, and they even had a groundbreaking ceremony in Pyongyang. So, railway project in North Korea is receiving interest not just from South Korea, but from China and Russia as well. But unfortunately, the inter-Korean railway system and the relevant discussion is still stagnant. So we need to come up with a more feasible and practical ideas to realize this. And if we think about the joint Panmunjom Declaration and the joint September Declaration, there was an active discussion about inter-Korean railway cooperation. So South Korean experts went to visit the railway infrastructure in North Korea a few years back. And also, we had a groundbreaking ceremony in Kaesong Industrial Complex. So those are very significant, but still we have a lot to do. But even if we want to do a lot, we cannot do much because of the international sanctions. So because of the UN and US sanctions, like now, the nuclearization and the missile program in North Korea are very big issues. So unless these two issues are resolved, we cannot do anything else. So if that is the current status, should we just sit idle? I think that's what many of us are struggling with. So if there's really nothing we can do tangible because of the international sanctions, so should we just do nothing and sit idle? Maybe we can develop more specific concrete concepts for the railway project. Maybe we can start doing some basic design and architecture. So once this is done, maybe we can also think about how to go about the construction itself. So in a way, research works and basic studies I think these can be done. So this doesn't require actual physical logistics of moving around people or supplies. So we can do these kind of advanced studies and research jobs. Basically research works and investigations and coming up with ideas about the project. Even with the ongoing sanction regime, we can do these things. So earlier, we sent a delegation, expert delegation to North Korea for due diligence to do inspection on the railway situation in North Korea. But for that kind of inspection, we need to bring a lot of equipment and devices to North Korea. But these equipments and devices are now banned to enter North Korea right now. So practically speaking, we cannot do another round of due diligence at this point. And also, I agree with Dr. Lee that we need to prioritize the Gyeonggi line. And if we are to actually start the project, then I believe that we need to do all the preparatory work, even though the sanction is still on. So once the sanction is off, we can start right away. We can start sending in people and supplies into Gyeonggi-san area and start working there right away. And also, we need to get some feedback from North Korea for some necessary items. For example, I believe North Korea has its own law on construction and inspections as well. So through North Korea's review process, we will be able to have more clear ideas about the construction cost, more specific cost, and construction period, and other items as well. So that is kind of necessary for construction projects such as this anyway. So I think we need to start doing that even with the ongoing sanction. And the inter-Korean railway cooperation is mutually beneficial, not just for two Koreas, but for other countries in the East Asia region. Then to persuade other neighboring countries and also the South Korean public, we need to come up with numbers. So we need to collect data and come up with numbers to make a case for investing in the railway in North Korea. And there will be some other businesses that can come together with the railway system. For example, selling refreshments inside the train and other possible businesses, another source of revenue from the railway project. So we can think about these things. So if the railway line passes through Pyongyang, for example, then actually North Korea disclosed what kind of land will be used for this kind of project. So these potential land, the candidate sites are really good asset. And also we need to work on the ground as well. So there will be some other subsequent businesses that can be derived from the railway project. So we need to think about and plan these businesses as well. And ultimately, this project will use taxpayers' money. So otherwise, it could be public-private partnership as well. So for the Siniju line, BOT was proposed as a project type. So the BOT, the word BOT used by North Korea, it's kind of PPP in South Korea. So if it's going to have a private sector money, then how is it going to be financed? So there are so many questions and detailed issues that we need to address and prepare. So even though there is a sanction right now, I think we can spend this time to work on these issues. And also, for Inter-Korean cooperation project, for the Gyeonggi line, it is not a missing line. But for example, if this line is extended to Seoul, including Mountain Dora, it's about the line between Seoul and Mountain Dora is about 60 kilometers. So if the entire Gyeonggi line is going to be upgraded to high-speed train, then we can work on this local line between Seoul and Mountain Dora, which is located within South Korea. So we can start upgrading the relevant railway section in South Korea and other relevant facility and infrastructure. And this kind of infrastructure within South Korea is already old and they require updating anyway. So we can start working on that. I will stop my comment here. Thank you. Thank you very much. And Dr. Park and his research institute. His research institute is not funded by the government. It's actually funded and established by construction companies in South Korea. So I believe that's why his perspective was very practical based on his ample experiences. So I wanted to emphasize this. And one thing quite struck with me. So we definitely need to do some feasibility study for the North Korean railway system, but it's going to be time consuming definitely, and it needs to be done. So even though the sanctions are on, we can work on it now. It will save us time if we can start on it now. I think that was also from his ample experiences. And a lot of procurement is going to be needed. Who's going to who's going to be the main player in procuring things? Is it going to be South Korea or North Korea? So yes, since he analyzes a lot of financial and economic aspects of such project, his input was really practical. And now next panelist is going to be Dr. Jung-jun Park from Korea Railway Research Institute. He is also a well-known expert on the railway and East Asia region. Dr. Park, please.
Thank you. First of all, President Na opened his presentation saying that peace economy, and also the presentation titled that it is not unilateral giving when it comes to the railway cooperation with North Korea, and I fully agree with that. My point is not a topic or discourse per se, but what I wanted to mention is the scenario for operation of railway in the early days. Moderator mentioned this, but since the introduction of Gyeongbu Express Railway, it's been about 10 years or 20 years now. But when we look back, there has been a lot of controversy before its introduction. Many argue that do we really need an express railway in such a small country? But with that, we now have express railway, and now all the Korean people welcome the fact that we can now go to Busan from Seoul in 2 hours. KTX, or Korea Express Railway, is something that Korean people cannot live without. It's something that they need. But the biggest controversy is that since the groundbreaking work, the benefit can only be felt once the railway is completed and up and running. That's why we have this dispute and debate. And in 2018, since the agreement between the two Koreas, we still haven't had any progress in terms of railway cooperation. It's too bad that the situation has to come to this, but we need to overcome this, and we want to untangle some of the difficulties that we're facing. And I think key here is the pilot project that we can do with the North Korea. Dr. Seo mentioned shortly about this, but and also President Na mentioned this, but Pyongyang, Beijing, and Pyongyang, Moscow has international route connecting North Korea with these two countries. Due to COVID-19, the railway operation is suspended, but they do have an international route. Although North Korean's railway is lagging behind, but they do operate international route. It's robust enough to operate international route. So through these lines, if we can do a slight renovation or an upgrading of the infrastructure, I think we can well operate the railway system. This is important, but because when you look at greenfield investment, it takes a lot of time from feasibility study to getting the key results. So there is definitely a financial burden on pursuing this. And the good way to solve this is to implement this pilot project. And I think pilot project is a good way to resolve different concerns. So what I wanted to touch upon is that in the early days, we may need certain railway operation scenarios. Currently, the west and east coastline border is linked. And we have 26 kilometers between Pengma Highland and with Pyeonggang, and also from Samcheok to Jeju, we have 110 kilometers, which is not connected in the east coastline. So with Inter-Korean Railway, we have no choice but to use Gyeonggi train line. If we were to connect to China, then we need to connect Gyeonggi line to Pyongyang, Sini, and then China. For Russia, before we complete East Coast Northern Line and Gyeongwon Line, we can only connect through Pyeongbuk Line, Pyeongnan Line, and we can also leverage Seoul, Pyeongsan, Sepo, and Najin Line. We in our institution, we're preparing for different scenarios and programs to solve how we're going to connect this in terms of technology. The signaling system is somewhat different between the two Koreas. So in the early days, we can leverage diesel-powered locomotive, and we can exchange cargo with passengers' cabin. And if we can exchange this, then we may not need a huge capex or investment to operate this train. Only when we have passengers and cargoes in operation, then people will know and see for themselves that they can actually benefit from this. So through pilot project, we will be able to learn about where the weakness is in the North Korean railway system, and we can therefore potentially improve that weakness. Also, there are technological consideration that we must look into when we connect the inter-Korean railways. We already touched upon the key points, but if I may just revisit something that was discussed during the working level discussion when we recovered the Gyeonggi line. So we are looking into phased approach to secure minimum safety first, and then expanding transportation capacity next. We need, therefore, working level discussion to enable this. When we tried to recover Gyeonggi Line in 2003, we agreed on three things. First, we agreed on signal communication and power chain design to connect inter-Korean railway. And we also talked about technological support to install and operate proprietary equipment. And also, we also talked about technology support timeline for repair. So we talked about how we're going to design and run and how we're going to transfer technology. When it comes to engineering and auditing equipment and materials, we agreed that we're going to have human exchanges and also conduct training. So in addition to construction, we've had a further discussion down with North Korea to talk about how we're going to operate and how we're going to transfer expertise and training and then human exchanges and education was discussed. And we also discussed that we may need to standardize technological standard and operation modes. So from the ROK side, we're going to help nurture North Korean railway experts, and North Korea will secure talent who has some understanding about South Korean technology to resolve the technology gap. And also, in order to enable this, we agree that we need a comparative document and dictionary on technological terminology. And we also agree that we need a common drawings to share. And we also need a comprehensive system. We're not just looking into railway system, but we also need to connect to communication system as well as electricity grid. In the past, when it comes to Inter-Korean Railway Corporation, it was done largely around doing research for South Korean research topics rather than looking into a long-term roadmap. But now we have a North Korean counterpart. So as Dr. Seo mentioned, because we have counterpart, we have to presume that we're going to work with our counterpart and prepare these plans accordingly. In addition to that, we have to consider funding, and these funding discussion can only take place once the sanction is relieved, as well as once North Korea becomes member of the international community. So that's something that should be done in the future, and with that in mind, we have to prepare well for the future cooperation. With that, I end my presentation.
Thank you very much. Dr. Park gave us a great summary comment for the session. And right now, what can we do if we say, okay, then let's do this. Let's connect the railway and let's run it together. Then can we do it right away? I think the question will reveal so much work that we need to do for preparation. So as the final panelist of the session, I think he gave us a great concluding point. So now time is almost up, but do you have any final thoughts? Maybe from Dr. Yu or any other panelist speaker? Okay, no. Yes, the time is up anyway. So as a moderator, in 2002, the Gyeonggi line connection project, and also Mountain Kumgang line project as well. I was involved as a working level officer, and also since the beginning of the current government, there were a lot of agreements, but no real progress has been made. So personally, I find it quite unfortunate. So if I can make a quick summary of all the panelists' comments, I believe that we will have a great policy proposal for the current government. And also Dr. Lee as well pointed out great future direction. And we also listened to great specific comments from panelists as well. So if we can somehow compile what's been talked about here, then we already have a great policy proposal for the government. And it will be a great policy guideline for the inter-Korean cooperation. So once again, I'd like to send my deep thanks to our presenters and discussants. Thank you very much.